right, let's do this. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Geek Garage podcast. I am your host, David, and this is part 2 of the Legacy of Mario, Super Mario Brothers. I said part 2, right? It's late. And it's part 2 of our Super Mario Brothers episode that we knew was going to have to be broken into 2 parts because Super Mario Brothers is a beast, right, Chase?
Oh, that it is. Oh my gosh,
awesome. But Chase, thank you so much for coming back and recording part 2. I know it's been a hot minute since we've done number 1.
Yeah,
but it's been a hot minute for a good reason, for sure.
Holidays were definitely a factor, and then I got sick.
Yeah.
But I'm back on my feet, and I am just glad to be back and doing what I love.
Yeah.
Talking about video games.
Yeah. And I mean, what else do you need in life?
Exactly.
Playing video games, and if you're not playing video games, talking about video games.
Cure for all that ails you.
Pretty much.
Or at least me.
Yeah. So I guess before we dive right into just that, I just want to throw a quick shout out to my good friend Zach, and he's our very first Patreon donor. He was the first person to I put out a thing on social media a couple days ago that we were going to take the first 3 people that sign up for Patreon and give them a free t-shirt, and he's the first one who's taken advantage of that as of this recording. So by the time it hits the streaming airways, it might not be, but it could be. There could be 2 slots still open, so even if there isn't, you should still go donate to our Patreon because it's only like $2. There's a couple tiers, and there's all kinds of cool perks. If you want to learn more about our tiers and how those work and what the perks are, feel free to just look us up on Patreon or go to our website, and we got a big old Patreon link on there as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Zach Wills, and he will be the first person listed on the Geek Garage wall of donors on our website, and we're super excited for him to be our first donor and to get donors, period. And yeah, so but with that, let's Chase, you want to jump right into it?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, as somewhat of a recap from the last episode, because I know it's been a minute, super quick, video game industry crashed in 1983. Not a very good beginning to our story.
It was fun to go over the history of that.
Yeah, for sure.
We ended up spending a little bit more time than I thought, but it was still fun.
True.
Like kind of as a precursor to what we were going to talk about, because it's it's pretty important to get into a little bit of the history. If we're going to discuss Mario.
Definitely, because Mario was a huge turning point in kind of resolving or bringing the industry back from that. But yeah, from like really, really hit or miss game quality, oversaturation of consoles, the computer becoming a staple. Yeah, the game industry crashed in 83. Mario rises from the ashes in the mid-80s with the launch of the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and the rest is history. It explodes. Nintendo then becomes basically the front runner of the industry. Mario, of course, becomes their mascot, and they pump out 3 brilliant Mario games on the NES, 1.5 on the Super Nintendo, Super Mario World, definitely, but then Yoshi's Island, even though it's called Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, Mario's basically a helpless baby. It's a Yoshi game at its core, but still with the Mario World name, so there's that. 64 obviously was, like we talked, that was where we ended, was with Super Mario 64, which was, as with almost every Mario game, a huge revolution in video games in general. I mean, that was basically, it wasn't the first 3D video game, but it was the first one that really captured the magic and the potential of what designing in a 3D space could be. And basically made it the new standard.
Yeah, it gave you the ability to walk around
Yeah.
and roam freely, and like you could literally just kind of jump up and down and walk around, jump around, jump up, get down, jump
Yep.
around.
Yep.
If you wanted to do that for 15 hours, that was a possibility.
Oh my god, and you are probably not even like far off. There were probably kids who literally did that. Because, a lot of game developers that weren't Nintendo were questioning if that was even possible.
Right.
Especially with a character like Mario, who was at that time, so ingrained with that 2D pixel,
Right.
style. People didn't think it could even work. Like, how do you make a 3D Mario game? What is that? What does that even look like?
Right.
Do you still go in like a straight line like you do... it was just like you had to imagine that's where they started.
Yeah. Did they even have like more than like up until that point? Did people know what Mario looked like on all four sides, or a 360 view?
I don't think so. I mean, there was the TV series that was really popular, but again, even that was 2D. I mean, that was 2D cartoons. So
Sure.
in terms of like a total 3D model like that, no, that was his like first time that you could rotate
Sure.
a camera all the way around Mario.
So,
which
pretty revolutionary.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that was a gargantuan, and like it or not, and there were definitely some growing pains in the industry because of it. But that became the new standard. Pretty much every developer after that had to adapt 3D as the new standard, because at that point 2D, I mean, if you even look at the N64's library, there's hardly any 2D games on that console.
Yeah.
Just because at that point,
Why bother?
right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely still merit in 2D games, and they're still very popular today. They're actually having a huge resurgence right now.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, especially in the indie scene. But yeah, that basically, and like I said, there were a lot of growing pains with that, and a lot of other staple franchises tried to go 3D and actually had some serious growing pains. Castlevania tried to go 3D, that with questionable results. Mega Man went 3D. Like, they practically all did. All of
Right.
those core franchises. Zelda went 3D with Ocarina of Time. Now, that actually went extremely well, if you know anything about game history.
Yeah.
Still regarded as, if not
course.
the greatest game of all time, one of the greatest video games ever. So
Right.
not all of them struggled with the transition.
Right. A lot of the Rareware games, those did really well,
Yes.
like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark,
Right.
Jet Force Gemini.
But even like taking 2D franchises and making them 3D, like Donkey
Sure.
Kong,
Yeah.
they took the staple Donkey Kong Country games and then did Donkey Kong 64, which was this gargantuan 3D game, which
Right.
was incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Donkey Kong 64. But anyway, sorry, going off on a
No,
tangent.
no, it's all right.
So yeah,
It's a relatable tangent. So
it's so fun.
Yeah.
We could do a whole episode just on the transition from 2D to 3D gaming. Oh
Yeah,
my, there's a lot
it's-
there.
oh yeah, it's nuts.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Because it's such an interesting concept to see what franchises made the jump really well and which ones
Right.
kind of struggled to make the jump. Because again, that was a very, very new approach to game development.
For sure.
But going back to our main man here, that was all basically ushered in by Mario. Mario 64 came on the scene as a
Yep.
launch title for the N64, and it was about one of the only launch titles for the N64. But that's really all you needed for a hot minute there.
Yeah, it kept players busy. I remember that being kind of a thing. Like there was this and like Star Fox. Wasn't that?
There was this one, and there was another game called Pilot Wings 64. I want to say that was it. Yeah, day one was like, you can play Mario and you can jump out of a plane in 3D.
Right, yeah.
That was-
On paper, a little underwhelming,
Yep.
but if you turn the games on back in, what was it, 96?
96,
Then
yeah.
it's going to blow your brain.
Yeah, the N64, I mean, I said it in the first episode. I mean, it's my favorite console. The N64 ended up having one of the smallest game libraries of all time, but definitely one of the most quality-driven ones.
Yes.
So it was definitely a console of quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
Big time.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
why it's my favorite console, too.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, the list of games on the 64 is it's staggering, especially Nintendo's first party, mainly because they lost a lot of third-party support because they were the only console at that time that were still using cartridges.
Right. Yeah, a lot of consoles were going to discs at that time.
That was the console. PlayStation entered the market, and that stole a lot of competition.
Right.
famously stole Final Fantasy. Up to that point, Final Fantasy had been on the Super Nintendo, the NES and SNES.
That's right.
And they were actually developing Final Fantasy VII for the N64, but then they had these grand aspirations for that game, and the N64 just couldn't do it.
Yeah, the cartridge I guess couldn't hold the technology.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's why it went to PlayStation, and from then on stayed with PlayStation. Sega did the Sega Saturn. Oof.
Yeah.
Didn't do hot at all.
Was it the Sega Saturn and then Dreamcast?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah. So Sega Saturn was that era, and man, the Sega Saturn flopped hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really staggering because the Genesis was so successful that one generation before.
Right.
But that transition, though, when Nintendo went 3D and then PlayStation came on the scene with like cutscenes and voice acting and all of these things that could now be included because they had all that disk space.
Yeah.
Man, the Saturn just couldn't find its footing anywhere in there, so it really, really struggled. Which also means it's one of the hardest systems to collect for nowadays.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous.
Do you have anything personally for this thing?
No, because most Sega Saturn games are in the hundreds of dollars a piece.
Oh, okay.
A piece.
Yikes.
I mean, yeah, there's not many Sega Saturn because it flopped so hard they didn't ship that many games.
Sure.
For it.
Yeah.
So consequently, there's just not that many fish out in the sea.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Oh my gosh, I mean, and the best games on it, Panzer Dragoon Saga is like a super famous game that's on the Saturn. Easily runs on eBay for $700 to $800.
Wow.
For a complete copy. It's staggering.
Crazy.
So. Anyway, so that brings us up to speed. So Mario's in 3D now. Mm-hmm. Sort of. That's why it's kind of funny. So technically the next, in the timeline here, the next Mario game is actually on the Game Boy Color.
Right.
And yeah, that was definitely a thing that they were really pushing at around this time. Also some of the most confusing game titles ever. You get to see like Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3, and you're like, God, it's just like it's such kind of a mess.
Yeah,
the way they numbered them.
Right. Yeah. When I was making my notes, I was like, I didn't even bother like trying to make sense of it. I was just like, okay, find it in chronological order.
Right.
And don't worry about the console. Just whatever console it is, put it in chronological order. And then all of a sudden, right after the 64, came up with a lot of the Game Boy Color game, and then Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance, GameCube, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance, and I was looking at it like, and just like you said, it's like what the hell is going on?
Well, what's so confusing too is they did it. The order they released them was so kind of wonky. They did the original Super Mario Bros. They called it Deluxe, I think. Was that? Yeah, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. That was the only one on the Game Boy Color. So they did that one first, which made sense. And then on the Game Boy Advance, they did the next one, which is Super Mario Brothers 2. The American version, not the Lost Levels Japanese version that we talked about. But then they just skipped Mario 3 for whatever reason, which I assume made a lot of people angry because that's most people's favorite Mario 3 or like NES Mario game. And went straight to Mario World, which is great because that's also one that people definitely wanted on the go. But totally skipped Mario 3. And then from World, then they ported Yoshi's Island. Then finally got around to Mario 3. So it was really weird the way that they released them.
Yeah, that is kind of odd going in that particular order. One question I was going to ask, so I don't know if I've ever... I distinctly remember owning the Game Boy, for sure. I don't think I ever owned a Game Boy Color or a Game Boy Advance. I owned the regular Game Boy and then a Game Gear.
Right.
But, so what... Do you know the difference between the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance?
So basically the original Game Boy was essentially a portable NES. That was about the graphical level that it was capable of.
Okay.
And of course it was also monochrome. You basically had a green screen and you had varying shades of black and gray, and that was essentially your color palette
Sure.
on the original Game Boy. So the Game Boy Color was essentially the same thing.
Right, but with color
With color.
introduced. Yeah.
Right. But graphically it was still about the same ballpark.
Right.
So basically the Game Boy Advance was essentially a Super Nintendo, a portable Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So a much larger color palette and much more pixels they could do. So instead of 8-bit games, they could do 16-bit games.
Gotcha.
So that's why you started seeing Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island. You saw a lot of SNES ports come to the Advance.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, just better graphics basically.
Cool.
Is the big difference there.
Yeah.
So yeah, otherwise I don't know a ton about them because at that point, I played the OGs on the NES and the SNES.
Sure.
And so I didn't really have to play the handhelds. It's great that they're there, especially at the time. That was a big deal. That was a lot of people's entry point to a lot of those games.
Right.
It was a great move for Nintendo, a very obvious move with the Game Boys.
One thing that I just thought of, did Nintendo kind of like halt production on like the original NES and SNES at this time, and that's kind of what spurred the push to make all these games for these handheld devices, or were they still making those consoles and they just wanted to kind of push themselves to make them for portable?
Well, yes and no. So they've always pushed their consoles to like the last day. So they never halted the consoles necessarily.
Okay.
But I think you are correct in that a lot of these pops and like, these explosions of like ports and things like that, I think generally speaking, those are usually towards the tail end of a console. So maybe when like the NES or the SNES is starting to kind of run out of steam and, that's maybe losing some of its luster, then they would kind of hit the Game Boys much harder.
Be like, hey, how about you take it on the go?
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if that's like, I don't know if that's exactly right, but I'm pretty sure if I remember the years that like the Game Boys came out and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that's a pretty safe assumption.
Yeah. I definitely remember like when the 64 came out, like obviously very few people had interest in backpedaling. Like it wasn't considered like super retro as it is now to get your hands on an original NES or an SNES, because it was still relatively quote unquote recent back in '96.
Right.
So they were looking at that point for the next best thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean the Game Boy games are great for what they are. But the first big Mario game that we talk about today, following Super Mario 64, is Super Mario Sunshine.
Right.
Which I love talking about Sunshine because
it's
a very interesting game.
Yeah, because I'm glad you like talking about it because I know little to nothing about it.
Yeah, it's... Oh my gosh, there's a lot to unpack with Sunshine. And I'll try and keep my tangents a little briefer this time. I know I really...
No, that's all right.
I got into the nitty-gritty last time.
Like I said, all this information is great. A lot of it is stuff that, I don't know, and it's more fun to hear it from you, and you do such a much better job at what I can read off of Wikipedia.
Well, I appreciate
and I'm sure it's much more...
it's fun for me to
set in stone as far as like the truth goes, coming from someone who takes gaming so seriously.
Oh my gosh, it's kind of my thing. So what's interesting, so first of all, up to now basically all your big Nintendo consoles have been launched with a Mario game. That was a staple of Mario consoles or Nintendo consoles. So of course the NES was launched with Super Mario Brothers, the Super Nintendo was launched with Mario World, and then the 64 was launched with Super Mario 64.
Right.
The GameCube was the first game to not do that. The GameCube actually launched with a Luigi launch title. Luigi's Mansion was actually, to somewhat of the chagrin of some people, everyone wanted the next big Mario game.
Right.
But nonetheless, so interestingly, Super Mario Sunshine was the first big 3D Mario game to not be a system launch title. Which not to discredit Luigi's Mansion. Luigi's Mansion is fantastic. That's a great game. But anyway, so yeah, Sunshine was not a launch title, but when it did drop, to this day, it's still definitely probably the most divisive Mario game.
Yeah, people either love it or they hate it.
Basically, there's not much middle ground. I am definitely in the love it category. As I tend to be with games, I'm very lenient. I enjoy most everything. A game has to be seriously broken for me not to get something out of it.
Sure.
But but you also have to understand, I mean, look at the act that it was following. People had Super Mario 64 in mind, which was revolutionary, as we've talked about. So there were some seriously high expectations for the next 3D Mario game. So they unveiled Super Mario Sunshine, and come to find out, the whole game is sort of centered around this tropical theme, this like tropical paradise getaway thing. That's why it's called Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
So whereas basically all the Mario games before it, level wise, were completely like disparate. You had you jump in one painting, it would be like a snowy world, and then you jump in another painting, and it'd be like Dire Docks, which was like a water aquatic, totally different.
Yep.
And then you jump in another painting, and it'd be like Tick-Tock Clock, which was literally just a giant grandfather clock that you had to climb up and stuff.
Right.
So it was beautiful in that way. And even before that, like Super Mario World, you had like the snow world, the desert world. That goes all the way back to like Mario 3. So you had all these sort of disparate worlds in Mario games, but that was sort of part of their charm.
Yeah.
Was just all these, how completely vast and different all these different playgrounds were that you got to jump in and run around in. So Super Mario Sunshine kind of comes along and sort of anchors it in this one central motif. So instead of having all of these different environments and worlds and things like that to explore, you were always in this tropical paradise world, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, though, because what's so cool about it, it almost grounds it in a sense of realism, so to speak.
Okay.
So since you're on this tropical paradise, that means instead of jumping into paintings and you're popping out at like cloud worlds and rainbow worlds and stuff like that, literally, you were of course you were on tons of beaches, but you were also at the harbor of the island, and then you go over to the theme park on the island, then you go to the hotel, and those were all of your worlds, actually. So instead of all these disparate, not like disconnected pieces, it was all much more cohesive, which some people really cite that as a major strength, because whereas some people with like Super Mario 64, it feels almost too disconnected to some people. I think it's part of the game's magic, but some people feel it's a little bit too disjointed and too disconnected. Right. Sunshine is much more a whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it's all,
that makes sense.
You're in this world, and you get to really immerse yourself in this place. It's called Isle Delfino, and it's kind of quirky in its presentation. It actually has a bit more of a story.
Okay.
Than we had seen in Mario games up to that point. Mario and Peach are actually on their way to go on vacation. And then they get there, and they get to Isle Delfino for their vacation, and this Mario lookalike, this Shadow Mario, is like wrecking the whole place and like,
of course,
painting graffiti on everything. So they arrest Mario, thinking that he's the one that's been doing it.
Sure.
And then they like charge him with the crime and make him clean up the whole island. So it's kind of cheeky like that, it's got a little more humor to it and a little more story to it. There's this really strange, like family conflict that's happening between Peach and Bowser's son. This is actually, because this is the first game that Bowser Jr. made his debut in.
Sure.
So, not to be confused with Baby Bowser from Yoshi's Island. That was Baby Bowser.
Yeah.
Same Bowser we know and love. Sunshine brought in Bowser's son, Bowser Jr., who's adorable, and I love Bowser Jr. But yeah, it's so weird. The whole game, Bowser Jr. thinks that Peach is his mom, and so he's trying to... That's kind of like his that's his reasoning for wanting to like capture Peach so that they can all be a family again. And it's different.
All
it's
right.
different.
It's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So Mario has to clean up the island, and to do that, you actually find the game's companion character, because most 3D Mario games, not all of them, but most of them, typically you have some sort of companion character. So in 64, it was actually the Lakitu bro who was holding the camera.
Okay.
Who's basically traveling with you the whole game, you know?
Right.
And in this case, it's his water cannon called Flood, spelled F-L-U-D-D. I can't remember what that's... It's an acronym for something. I can't remember what it is. Yeah, Flood is this kind of AI. It can talk, and it kind of sounds like an AI computer. And yeah, so that's sort of your companion character, and he wears it on his back the whole game.
Right.
So you can use it as a gun, you can spray water on enemies and spray it on graffiti and stuff like that, and you can also flip the nozzle downwards and use it as like a jetpack.
Oh, okay.
So you have a much broader mobility spectrum than you've had in Mario games before.
Sure.
So it was super cool. It kind of helped with some platforming sections if you really struggled. You could do your regular Mario jumps, but then if you didn't quite make it, you could use your nozzle to kind of glide you that extra little bit further. And then there were all sorts of like temporary nozzles that you could equip. That was like a rocket nozzle that would like shoot you up like a rocket. There was like the speed one that made him like burst really, really fast, and you'd run really, really uncontrollably fast. So that was sort of this game's main gimmick, for lack of... I hate that word, but essentially,
Gotcha.
that was like that big hook, that big new innovative gameplay element, was Flood. So that was super cool. Also, contrary to Super Mario 64, they brought Yoshi back as a playable character. In Super Mario 64, you only got to see Yoshi if you beat the game 100%, if you got all 120 stars.
Wow.
That was the only way you would get to see Yoshi. If you got that 120th star, then you get to go up on the roof of Peach's castle, and you could get to see Yoshi, and then he'd give you like a butt ton of lives, and that was it. I mean, that was the extent, but it was a cameo, but that was it. And so this was the first time in a 3D game that you got to actually interact with Yoshi in a 3D environment, and it was super cool the way they implemented him, because you're still riding Yoshi like he does in like Super Mario World, which is awesome. But since you're in this tropical place, there's like fruit all over the place. You know what I mean? Like there's tropical fruit everywhere.
Right.
And depending on what fruit Yoshi eats, he can like spit out the goo from that fruit as like his own sort of projectile.
Sure.
And it was just it was so great. So anyway, so I mentioned before though, it is definitely it's probably the most divisive Mario game. Definitely, probably. And some people, well, first, a lot of people complain about the camera, but that was a staple of that whole era. I mean, even by that point, even by that console, even though we were a console into the 3D, mindset, I mean, they were still figuring that out in a lot of ways.
Sure.
I mean, there were still, gosh, you play
breaking new grounds.
I mean, I mean, if you still play like PS2 games or original Xbox, I mean, there's
some quirks.
Yeah, camera control was still a thing that they were still kind of coming to grips with.
Right.
So, that's just a product of its time. I don't really, and I actually don't remember struggling too vehemently much with it. So another thing that people sometimes take issue with, there are some relatively frustrating, or to some people, not relatively frustrating, mini-game levels.
Okay.
So there's some mini-game levels that can be absolutely brutal. Because this is a Mario game, and with Mario games, you always have a finite number of lives, depending on how many of those green mushrooms you find.
Right.
So a lot of these mini-games, and some of these mini-games were so long, like it took forever to get to them. So if you got to them, and of course you were going to struggle with them because they were challenging, way more challenging than some of them needed to be. And if you lost all your lives, then you had to make the whole trek back to the mini-game.
Right, yeah.
That sort of thing. So that was, oh my God, anybody that's played Super Mario Sunshine, if you say the word pachinko game, oof. That kind of sends a shudder down the veteran's spine, because there's this giant pachinko game. Oh my god, it's kind of infamous for being like one of the most infuriating Mario levels like of all time. I actually didn't struggle too incredibly bad with it from what I remember. I think I got lucky, but yeah. But otherwise, I mean, it was the first Mario game to have voice acting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which
That's big.
yeah, luckily Mario wasn't. It's almost like The Legend of Zelda Link, even with the most recent game with voice acting, Link still doesn't talk.
Yeah.
It's that same sort of thing. All the other characters talk now. Peach, Bowser, there's this little Toad character called Toadsworth who's beautiful. They're all fully voice acted, at least in the cutscenes, except Mario. Mario is still kind of limited to his "let's go" and his just little fragments that he's always said forever. But that's it, and I'm very glad that they kind of kept it that way, because I can't imagine Mario just having like a full conversation with somebody. It just seemed like we've been with Silent Mario for so long now. It would just seem kind of weird to hear Mario just like have this whole conversation with somebody.
Sure. So, yeah, I can definitely see that. Like it would. I mean, I'd be interested to see what it's like just for clarity's sake, but. Yeah, it probably is one of those like better in small numbers, kind of things.
Right. I mean, there's just
or more less is more.
It's a double-edged thing. Like I always want to hear his little quirky fragments that we know him saying. But I think there's like a line there. Like, don't go any further than that. But the rest of the cast is fully voiced, for better or worse. And that's from an era that's just known for really not great voice acting. God, especially Bowser. Oh, the guy who did Bowser. I don't know who did Bowser's voice, but oof.
No bueno.
It's just,
leaves something to be desired.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, aside from like some camera controls that are a product of its time, a couple of frustrating mini games, and some less than Oscar-worthy voice acting. It's a brilliant. I love the game because, like I said, it's probably the most cohesive Mario game in terms thematically. It all being rooted in that sort of tropical paradise.
Right.
Because what's cool is they take that one motif and they do so much with it, and I think that's really fun. Even though you have like a couple different like bay, levels where you're on like Noki Bay, and then you're on this bay. They're so different. They each have their own style and theme and everything that makes them different. And of course, then you have some really out there levels, like the theme park called Peanut Park, which is an awesome level.
Okay.
The hotel is a great level, and then Corona Mountain is this like volcano that's in the middle of the island.
Sure.
That's where the final boss is. So I mean, I love Super Mario Sunshine, and one of the coolest things. So I told you about Flood, which, a lot of players, it was helpful, but it, could also be used as a crutch if you weren't particularly good at platformers.
Right.
A lot of players would use it as like a crutch. If you don't make the jump, then you can just hold it down and, you can kind of glide the rest of the way. But what's cool is in every level, there's these secret areas, these secret courses, right? Where Shadow Mario comes in and actually takes Flood away from you, because Nintendo loves doing that. Nintendo loves giving you this ability that you get really good at using, and you kind of depend on it, and then taking it away and see if you've actually learned, see if you've actually been like getting good at the game,
right? Or just relying on that crutch,
right? Like they love to test you like that, and it's cool because it's rewarding, because then you make sure that you don't crutch yourself. You make sure that it's there as just an extra thing, not a tool.
Feels like that's way too much thought to be put into video games, but it's smart.
It's brilliant. And so you go into these secret courses and you have Flood taken away, and they are these they're all these geometric, like it's this very kind of minimalist course where it's like rotating blocks and rotating cubes and very simplistic platforming, but very specific. And you had to do it without Flood. That was a big seed right there that would later blossom into what would become Mario Galaxy, actually.
Okay.
In a lot of ways. Those levels, with sort of the geometric look, just the feel of those levels, you can definitely, having played Mario, I'm actually replaying Galaxy right now, you can definitely see where that seed was planted when they were designing those levels. So yeah, Super Mario Sunshine, it is divisive, but I love it. Some people, will say like it's a good game, but it's not a great Mario game,
right?
Sort of thing. Like if you'd put any other mascot or character in that place, it would have held up much better under scrutiny. It's just because it was following Super Mario 64, and it's maybe not quite what people were expecting at the time. That may have led to so much of the divisiveness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, because when you look at the game on its own merits, it's brilliantly constructed. The level design is, of course, it's Nintendo.
Yeah,
they're geniuses with this sort of thing. I mean, it's Nintendo at their finest at the time. So, I recommend Super Mario Sunshine wholeheartedly. Fingers crossed for a Switch remaster. Get on that, Nintendo. So anyway. So, yeah, that was Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah, I'm always up for the Nintendo Switch doing more N64 games and GameCube games. Please and thank you.
Oh, please. Yeah, they've been really hesitant up to now to do that. So,
yeah,
hopefully all in good time.
I might, we were talking about Animal Crossing the other day during lunch, and like I've never played it before, but the idea and the sound of it kind of makes me want to get a Switch now, so I don't know if it's going to be a huge issue getting your hands on a Switch, or particularly the Animal Crossing themed, the special edition.
They're getting hard to get a hold of.
Yeah,
they've already sold out of pre-orders.
Oh yeah, it definitely seems that way.
Yep.
So I don't think it's gonna break my heart to get a special edition one. I've never really been that kind of person who's just like gotta have it. But eventually, I like a right. Yeah, you are definitely that person. Are you gonna get the special edition, or did
at
you?
Some point. Okay. Oh yeah, maybe not day one, but eventually.
Sure. Yeah. You think they'll keep making them for a little bit?
I think so. I almost hope they release some of the parts of it separately. I'm not sure. They're doing it that way in Japan, where you can get like the Joy-Cons separately.
Oh, sure. So you don't have to buy the whole console again.
Right.
That makes sense.
I don't know if that's going to happen in America, though. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. It'd be great if I could kind of buy it in chunks rather than just having to buy another $300 Switch.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean.
That would be convenient.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
So anyway, so you had Super Mario Sunshine, which was a thing. I consider a good thing. So chronologically, next we jump ahead a couple of years. So Nintendo's next handheld launches, which is the Nintendo DS for dual screen.
Yeah.
If anyone ever wondered.
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, and of course, I can't remember if it was a launch title or not. Yeah. Mario was So, the DS launches with Super Mario 64 DS. Now, contrary to the Game Boy games, though, this was a different game from 64 as everyone knew it. So, I'm trying to keep it somewhat brief. So the biggest thing that Super Mario 64 DS added was 3 new playable characters.
Okay.
They added Luigi, Yoshi, and Wario, actually.
Okay.
Interestingly. And so that was definitely one of the biggest. And so, it's funny, like I was talking about how the Game Boy was sort of like a portable NES. The Advance was essentially like a portable SNES. So the Game Boy, they were sort of the DS, they were sort of touting as like a portable 64, essentially. Sure. And what better way to show that off than literally bringing Super Mario 64 to the DS,
right? As
like a day one thing, just to demonstrate this is what it can do. This is a big deal. 3D gaming on the go, which was a big deal.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting launch title instead of like an OG, doing a remake of a classic game.
Right.
So it's definitely an interesting choice as a launch title.
Yeah, so yeah, and what's so interesting is the changes they made to it. Some people will argue for the better. The playable character is definitely kind of is a really interesting inclusion, to the point where actually you don't even start the game as Mario. You actually start the game as Yoshi. You have to find Mario.
That's an interesting choice, considering you get like 10 seconds of Yoshi in the original.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
Kind of comes full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, he wanted that limelight.
Yeah, right.
Snubbed from him. So yeah, you literally start the game as Yoshi. And then they added like 30 additional like bonus stages, like actual stages.
Okay.
So
wow.
They really, like the castle got bigger. They added some new rooms in the castle. One of the biggest things that people definitely missed, though, contrary to the 3DS that came later, the original DS did not have an analog stick.
Right.
It only had the D-pad. So that just was so weird that you had Super Mario 64, which was like known for that like full circle.
Yep.
N64 analog stick, you could move in every direction and like,
that
flexibility.
That is very weird.
To all of a sudden have to do the same game but with a D-pad with 4 directions and that's it. That was really hard for especially someone like the veterans to really come to grips with. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Even me playing it, definitely, it feels strange, but because it's Super Mario 64, and like I said, that's kind of what it was known for.
Do you think they kind of had, quote unquote, to do that because of like restrictions on their part? Like maybe they just weren't there yet in terms of like technology and advancements.
I assume it had to have been. I don't know exactly why there was no analog stick on the original DS, but no, there definitely wasn't, and yeah, so you had to play Super Mario 64 with a D-pad, which even just saying it sounds weird. But that aside, a lot of people say you can get used to it. I got used to it. It eventually wears off enough that you don't necessarily think too much about it.
Sure.
Because it's still, it's Super Mario 64. It's one of the greatest games of all time. And so to have that on the go was a huge deal.
Right.
Even if you had to sort of adapt to it, it was still what it was, which was Super Mario 64.
Right.
So, it added a multiplayer mode. I don't remember exactly what that entailed. But anyway, it was a great way to kick off the DS, if maybe a little strange. I know people were maybe, like you said, maybe had wanted a new, like, fresh Mario game,
right,
to be represented, but they still got one, and it was a classic that was sort of breathed some new life into, which is always great when devs do that. So yeah, that was Super Mario 64 DS, and then from there we stay on the DS, and we come to the first 2D Mario game since the 6 golden coins on Game Boy.
Oh wow!
By this point, if you don't count all the oh shoot, if you don't count all, excuse me, almost knocked your mic over.
It's all good.
If you don't count the Game Boy ports, then yeah, Super Mario Land 6 golden coins. That was the last 2D Mario game.
Okay.
Because like we were talking about, when it went 3D, that was just something that was probably a hard sell for a while there. So I think 3D had to sort of come and make itself known and then be around for a while before they started toying with 2D games again. I think they sort of had to let 3D not be quite such like a revolutionary, like novelty thing anymore. And so I think when the timing was right, that's when Nintendo decided to go and start working on a new 2D Mario game. And so the hype was real for this game. I think it's actually the highest selling game on the DS to this day is New Super Mario Brothers. And that's exactly what they wanted it to be, was Super Mario Brothers, but new, hence the title, New Super Mario Brothers.
Sure.
And yeah, it's awesome. I love it. It's meticulously designed. It's amazingly, it's a great game. But compared to the likes of like Mario World and Mario 3 and even the original Mario, Nintendo had sort of been known for a bit more innovation
Sure.
than maybe what New Super Mario Brothers kind of gave people.
Sure.
There was definitely some new cool elements. Obviously, there was a couple of new power-ups. There was like the Mega Mushroom that made Mario huge.
Right, yeah.
And you could like just Godzilla through the whole level, which was super satisfying.
Right,
It was
yeah.
awesome. And then contrary to that, there was actually the Mini Mushroom, which shrunk you down to like ant size.
Right.
And so then, you could like run a lot faster and your jumps were a lot higher.
Yeah, we saw that in an earlier game, right? In another 2D platformer.
I don't think there was a power up that did it. There was a world that was like that.
Okay.
Where it was like giant world where
I
like
could be thinking of just another conversation we had previously that wasn't on the podcast.
Sure.
And we were in fact talking about this game right here.
Oh, you're good. Yeah. So there was the Mega and Mini mushrooms. And then there was the shell power up, which basically gave him a Koopa shell on his back.
Yeah.
And then he could like curl up into it and then he'd roll around and you could like smash blocks on the ground and enemies with it. And so those were super cool to use. And then what was kind of interesting is how it almost incorporated what we call Metroidvania elements.
Okay.
Which is a genre of game basically meaning you get to a point in a level where you realize you need a power up or an item that you don't have in that moment in order to do that. So like if you played a level, say you got to a level with like the fire flower or say you were even just regular Mario, but you see like this tiny little pipe. Well, you needed the mini shroom, right? You needed to be mini Mario.
Right.
But if you didn't have it there, you had to come back later with that specific power up. So it actually added that element of like certain areas in the levels that you needed specific power ups to get to and interact with. And
Interesting.
And if you wanted to complete the game, you like 100%, you had to because it started this trend with like these 3 giant mega coins. And there were 3 of them in every level, and they were always in some kind of hard to reach place or hidden area.
Yeah.
And so you had to collect all these, big staple coins. I don't remember exactly what they called them.
Yeah. Was it hard to keep track of like knowing when you or which places you need to come back to when you have those power ups?
Sort of, in that, like, yeah, you'd be in this level because a lot of times it would actually require having to leave that level, going to another level, getting that power up, finishing that level with that power up, not getting hit, and then going now. So now you've got the mini shroom. Now go back to the level you need it in,
right,
and then play through it to the point where you need it, and then you can access that area.
Right.
So it did kind of add some intensity, definitely, because once you had that power up you needed, I mean, you couldn't get hit,
right,
or you'd lose it. So you had to finish that old level. Typically, I mean, there were some levels that, luckily, you get to an area, you get to something, and that specific power up would be in that level, and you could just go back and get it.
Right. Because Mario isn't like nerve-wracking enough.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Trying not to like lose, what you have.
Exactly.
And decrease in size and whatnot.
Right,
But,
right.
Now you have something that you desperately need to hang on to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, the mini shroom, what was cool about that one, too, is that actually that would let you run on water. So you
That's right. I remember that.
So you definitely needed that for some situations. So yeah, like the new power-ups were super cool. I'm trying to think. That was the game that introduced Dry Bowser, who's kind of become like a staple in like Mario Kart and stuff like that. Which is like Bowser, but like skeleton form. So like you fight him once, and then he falls in the lava, and then you actually fight him again, and he's just like a skeleton.
Yeah.
He's harder to take down.
Right.
Yeah, so it, it introduced Dry Bowser, which was super cool. But otherwise, it basically still followed that same, the first world was like the grass world, and then the second world was probably like the desert or the snowy world. And it was like that basic, that signature formula, which that's the name of the game with Nintendo, is finding a basic formula that works and then tweaking it, building upon it over time. They're masters at that.
Right.
But that's what it is. But it was at the time, it was a great way to bring a new 2D Mario experience to a handheld, which people were gawking for big time at that time. Mm-hmm. And so, they definitely delivered on what people wanted. And like I said, it's still a great game. I mean, Mario, you can't go wrong with, a Mario game.
Right.
I mean, those are the most precisely designed games you can get your hands on.
Right. I mean, since day one.
Right.
It's been like that.
Right. So, yeah, that was New Super Mario Bros. But, that was a 2D game, and we are in the era of 3D gaming. Mm-hmm. So then the Wii. We're now in the Wii era.
Hey everyone, it's David from the Geek Garage Podcast. I just wanted to take a quick second to tell you about our new partnership with Everyday Superhero Training. They are a gym in Nashville, Tennessee that you should definitely check out. The gym is ran by Julian and Lydia, who make up the Everyday Superhero Training team. And what Everyday Superhero Training is a nerd-centric, holistic, personal training and group fitness wellness program taught through the modalities of RPGs, video games, comic books, superheroes, and pop culture nerdiness. Just a few things that they have to offer is a free digital magazine that covers everything that they nerd out about, and it is delivered straight to your email inbox. They have a soon-to-be famous Mission Quest fitness RPG, Nerd Skills, which is a class that uses specific training tactics to help you improve at activities you already enjoy, superhero tinted group classes, personal training integrated into every level of membership, a supportive and positive environment that wants to hear more about your current D&D campaign or show that you're currently binging, and then how much you can binge. So please support Julian and Lydia by visiting everydaysuperherotraining.com for more info on this amazing gym. Thank you. If the door wasn't kicked in by Nintendo at this point, it was definitely off its hinges.
Oh, yeah.
When the Wii rolled around. I can't remember if I told you this, but when the Wii came around, I was working at Target at the time, and people start. It didn't really affect me at all. I worked in the what was called Food Avenue, not really around much. That's a separate conversation, but sure. Where Starbucks is in a lot of Targets, it was right around the corner, and that's where we sold the personal pan pizzas, the pretzels and stuff, and that's where I worked. And that Monday, people started lining up. And it was in the wintertime, right? It was like February or March, something like that, when it was released, and so people were camping out. They had their tents and they were all lined up, and it confused me at first. I was like, what's going on? And then I remember I was like, wait, the Nintendo Wii, that new console is coming out soon.
Yep.
And one of the guys that works in the electronic department, he came by and he was on his break. He bought something, and I was like, "Are they waiting for what I think they're waiting for?" And he was like, "They're waiting exactly what you think they're waiting for."
Yep.
And I was like, "That's insane, right?" And he was like, "Yes, but we've already started giving out tickets because we only have a certain amount of consoles, and we don't want people waiting around for days, literally days, thinking that they're going to get their hands on a console, and they just wasted a whole work week thinking that they're going to get one. So they ended up just giving out tickets to people until until they ran out of tickets, and then they started turning people away. So that's my little fun story about the Wii, and it's just the craziness of it coming out, and people are just excited with the immersiveness of all the motion controls and the Wiimote and all that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So in the days of the NES and the SNES, Nintendo dominated the video game industry. There wasn't a whole lot of competition there. But like I said, once the 64 came around, even though it was revolutionary, PlayStation really came in and hit the scene hard.
Yeah.
And really won over the market. The N64 did fine, but nowhere near as good as their past consoles, as well as and not I don't think it did as well as the PlayStation. Actually, I'm almost positive it didn't. So the next gen, they wanted to really bounce back with the GameCube, but the GameCube, sort of same story. It did well. It was fine, but it wasn't, compared to like the PlayStation 2, which to this day is the best-selling console of all time.
Right.
It was dwarfed by the PS2, and that was the generation that Xbox came on the scene with the original Xbox.
Yeah.
Which was very successful as well because it had so much just that, the RAM and the freaking horsepower behind that thing because it was made by Microsoft.
Right,
who made computers.
Yeah, that was Xbox, when they came around, that was a big deal because they were like, yeah, that company that makes friggin' computers? They're making a video game console, and it blew people's minds.
So, like, graphically, that was by and large the best looking console.
Right.
It had the highest graphic capability, and it supported online play, of course, because it's Microsoft.
Right.
So online multiplayer came on the scene. You had things like Halo coming on the scene where, that became a huge phenomenon.
Yeah.
And Nintendo was over there with their little GameCube, their little purple lunchbox. And I love the game. It's one of my favorite consoles, too. I love the GameCube.
Yeah, it's at this point, like, as we record this podcast, at this point in time, it is like the cult classic.
Yes, it definitely is.
Of at least Nintendo consoles, I feel like.
I think it is too.
Or if not, just all consoles in general.
I think I think a lot of people share that sentiment actually, where it is such a wealth of incredibly great games, and third-party support was fairly strong on it, thankfully, as opposed to the 64s. But like I said, compared to the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, they kind of got just sort of
dwarfed.
Kind of pushed aside in most regards. So Nintendo was ready to kind of come back in full freaking force, and they wanted the market back.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think the Wii was exactly what the market needed for them to do that.
For sure.
Because the name of the game with the Wii was they literally wanted to appeal to everybody. To the gamer, the hardcore, the people who had never played games in their lives.
Right.
They wanted to appeal to everybody. That's why it's called the Wii. With two eyes, because it was all centered around we, us, communal.
Right.
That's what they really, really wanted that console to sort of embody.
Right. And as soon as you boot it up, you got that feel.
Oh, my God.
It was like, hey, add you, add your brother, add your sister, add your whole friggin' family.
I was about to say the Mii's.
Yeah, the Wii Mii's. Yeah.
So you went on there and you could make you made your whole family, and then of course every Wii that came out was bundled with Wii Sports,
right? And so much fun.
It became this phenomenon. Like grandmas were playing the game. People who never played video, and that's exactly what Nintendo wanted, was that broad appeal. People who've never played a video game in their life, and hardcore gamers alike, all had something from the Wii that they could enjoy, that they could get on board with. So then, of course, that meant that it's a new Nintendo console. Where's Mario? So, with that broad appeal in mind, they definitely didn't want to repeat Sunshine in terms of sort of like pigeonholing themselves in sort of like a sort of specific motif, a specific theme, so to speak. So they essentially took Super Mario 64 and they put it in space. And created the first Super Mario Galaxy game. Like I said, I'm replaying it right now. Yeah. It is if it's not my favorite Mario game, it is definitely it's like
very good.
One of the ties, you know, like up there with like Odyssey or whatever. I don't even know 64 as well. But Galaxy is an absolute masterpiece because while it is sort of rooted in like a space motif, because it is Galaxy, right? That's sort of that's the whole thing. Is now, screw just being like stuck in the Mushroom Kingdom, or much less like a little island.
Right.
You were on this literal starship, and you had this entire universe, this entire galaxy, to explore. You had all these galaxies to go to and explore, and it just was an enormous game compared to anything that Mario had up to that point. Right. So you weren't just jumping in paintings anymore.
You're jumping from planet to planet.
You were literally diving into galaxies. Yeah. So what was so cool, while there was that space theme, that definitely meant that it was nothing like Sunshine, and that, you know, in that, you know, it all felt spacey.
Yeah.
Whereas everything in Sunshine was like all sort of tropical paradise.
Right.
You sort of went back to that 64.
Yeah.
There's this galaxy that's like the honeybee universe, and that's like, you know, that universe was
Right.
like all, you know, it's like the honey hive kingdom, or not kingdom, universe or galaxy. But then you go to like the dessert universe where everything's made out of cakes and ice cream and stuff, and it was just the creativity with every galaxy. I mean, of course you had a couple of galaxies that were like space junk galaxy, which was like your just raw space, like jumping from like pieces of like space shrapnel and like
Sure.
asteroids, and like jumping from those, you know, that was definitely present. But you also had like Beach Bowl Galaxy, which was like, you know, the tropical galaxy but with like a space twist, because the biggest thing with a galaxy, and, you know, so like 64, that big thing was that it was 3D, obviously. That was like the thing there.
Right.
Sunshine was like the tropical thing with like the flood thing, with flood. Galaxy's big thing was this gravity hook
Right.
that they incorporated into everything, where nothing was a 2D plane. You were always on these like spherical planets, or you know, you'd be on top of the planet, but then you could jump off, and instead of falling to your death, most instances you would wrap around and you go to the bottom of the planet.
Sure.
And it was literally like that was the hook here, was this gravity mechanic. So even your sort of standard galaxies, like you had your snowy galaxy and your beach galaxy and your desert galaxy, but even though those were sort of like familiar places Mario's been to, with this whole new gravity element, and with this whole new like galaxy theme where you had these individual planets that you were going to and from, it completely like threw everything, all of our preconceived notions of like a Mario desert level or a Mario, you know, snow level, and it completely turned it upside down on its head. And it was absolutely brilliant. And, you know, obviously the production value and the graphics were completely, it was a huge upgrade from Sunshine.
Right.
You know, the game starts with like they're having this cute little star festival at the Mushroom Kingdom. Bowser comes in, literally, with a spaceship, and rips Peach's castle out of the ground and carries it off with them to the center of the galaxy or universe or whatever. And so you give chase, you get knocked off, and then you kind of get picked up by these little star creatures called the Lumas.
Okay.
Which is so cool, because you actually kind of find out that's actually like the stars that Mario collects. You know how they have little eyes on them?
Right.
Well, that's essentially what they are. That's like in their like infant form.
Okay.
Those go on to become stars, and eventually grand stars in some cases. So it kind of gave some like weight to, you know, Mario's basic collectible, which is super cool.
Sure.
And it also introduced a character named Rosalina, who's become somewhat of a series mainstay. Yeah, you tag along with her. You go to her what's called Observatory, which is sort of the hub world, and that's your ship that you use to get from galaxy to galaxy. And then from there it's standard Mario. You know, go from galaxy to galaxy, get the star, and the more stars you get, the more galaxies open up. But man, I mean, it's just so different from anything that came before. You know, with the power ups. You know, you still have like your fire flower and like the star power up that makes you invincible.
Yep.
But then they add like the bee suit, to where Mario turns into like a bee, and you can use it to buzz and fly around.
Right.
It allows you to stay on certain platforms that regular Mario would fall through, like flowers and clouds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's like a spring when you're in this like toy galaxy. You literally, he kind of like gets wrapped up in the spring, and so then you're just kind of like bouncing around in the spring. And I mean, it's just like the creativity it's just amazing how far they went with this whole idea. And so anyway, and like and that's why I set the standard for, or set the stage for the Wii, because it appealed to so many people, because it was, you know, it was so inventive, it was so colorful, and you know, there were, you know, it was challenging if you wanted it to be, but to beat the game, you know, a kid could have done it.
Right.
Which is exactly what they wanted, so that they kept that like broad appeal.
Yeah.
But yeah, like motion controls, of course, were a big thing too. But the great thing is, and what a lot of people love about Galaxy, is that contrary to a lot of Wii games at that time, the motion controls weren't really like crammed down your throat like a lot of them tended to be. They really could have just gone haywire with it, but what they actually ended up doing was very kind of subtle. It made sense. Most of the time, you weren't really doing anything more than just pointing at the screen, because you had a little pointer. You always had this little pointer, and that's actually how you could kind of pick up one of your main collectibles, which were these little star bits. You could just kind of hover over them, and then they'd come to you, which is super cool. The only other thing, though, is a flick of the wrist, and that was really the extent of it. And what was cool there, like I said, Flood you could use in Sunshine to kind of as like a crutch. Sort of same thing in Galaxy, where you could do a jump. If you didn't quite make it, you could flick the Wiimote and he'd do his little spin, which would give you that extra little lift.
Right.
But that's really about it. There were a couple of Galaxies that had you hold the Wiimote and use it in sort of different ways. So there's one where like he stands on a ball and he has to like roll the ball under his feet. Right. And you had to hold it sort of like...
Oh, yeah.
You know, you had to hold it vertically and sort
of... Like a mortar and pestle?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And sort of steer him that way. And then there's one where he surfs on a manta ray, and you have to almost do it with almost like a key and a lock. Yeah. And then there was a couple where he's like trapped in a bubble and you're looking down on him and you had to use the pointer to sort of guide the bubble, you know, for him not to bump into anything. Yeah. But otherwise, nothing that caused you to have to like stand up and clear the room and
right, you know, like
no Wii Sports or anything like that.
Right, that and like the Wii Fit stuff.
Right,
when they really started kicking up the activeness of the Wii.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, I feel like that's kind of what especially when Mario went 3D back in the 64 days. Mm-hmm. Their thing has kind of been like less is more. Like these little tweaks are like just little innovations that are like, oh, like I see what they did there. Like it's like a little thing that makes, no pun intended, like a world of difference. Yep. And it just becomes one of those like really cool things, and you're like, wow, like it's not even that big of an advancement on the previous game or what we're used to. Mm-hmm. It is something new, but like it's so subtle, but and in that way it's awesome. Yeah. They're always small little adjustments, but there's a lot of weight to those. For sure. They feel substantial, even if, in theory they're really not, they don't break the mold or anything. But yeah, I mean, God, I could go on and on about Galaxy. I have to cut myself off. I mean, that was the debut of Captain Toad, who actually went on to have his own game. Okay. Who became a series mainstay, which was super cool. Oh my gosh, I could go on and on. But I have to move on. Oh my gosh, I could talk about Galaxy all day. So then we go back to 2D. Yeah. Right. Yeah, after following the heels of Galaxy. Yeah, so then we get to New Super Mario Bros. Wii. As Chase is just like,
Of course. No, it's, again, sort of the same thing as the DS New Super Mario Bros. Game. It's a great game. The name of the game here, the big sell here was the multiplayer. This is the first time we ever had multiplayer in a Mario game. All right. You could have up to 4 people crammed into these stages, and it was absolute chaos. You were constantly, like, getting your friends killed, and if you got too far away, it would make the screen zoom out really, really, really far, so people were like getting lost. And, right. But that was part of the fun. Sure. And it made it much more accessible for, again, since they're trying to have the broad appeal, if there was maybe a much younger little gamer who wanted to play Mario, you could have, the older gamer kind of steering, but then you could sort of help them,
Right.
you could jump ahead and take care of the Goombas and the Piranha Plants and sort of help,
Yeah.
because again, that was the name of the game when it came to the Wii, was that broad appeal, and that's exactly what they were, tailoring this game to.
Yeah, and that's always like, historically speaking, that's a very tough line to toe. Like when you want to reach literally everyone, historically speaking, 9 times out of 10, you just end up upsetting more people than you really want to make friends with.
Oh, it happens all the time.
Yeah, but Nintendo has always done such a great job, and especially with the Wii, of doing that. And case in point, what you just said, what if you have a situation where, which isn't even that groundbreaking, of wanting your entire family to play Wii all at the same time.
Exactly.
So, mom, dad, brother, sister, whatever. And like you said, you have the younger, less advanced players, the parents that, or, a kid that's like 10 that's showing up, mom and dad be like, come on, mom and dad,
Exactly.
you got your day job, I got my Wii.
Exactly, and that's exactly what they wanted to do with the multiplayer, and that's what they did. You could literally carry characters. I mean, you could literally pick a character up and like carry them if you needed to. It definitely broadened the appeal to the family, but it was very much a continuation of the DS game.
Sure,
like a pretty substantial continuation, not much of a building upon.
Okay.
More so than just, like I said, a continuation. There were a couple of new sort of innovative power-ups. There was the propeller hat that put a little helicopter propeller on his head, and if you shook the Wii remote, he would go really high.
Right.
That was cool. There was the penguin suit where you could throw ice balls and slide down snowy hills.
Right.
But other than that, it didn't bring a whole lot to the table that was new. But what was also cool, again, keeping with the broad appeal, whereas you could have new inexperienced gamers, or I guess they wouldn't be gamers if they weren't experienced. If you had newcomers, it definitely was tailored to them as well. But if you were a pro, oh my God, that game got hard. That late game content in Mario Wii, it gave me a run for my money.
All right.
So when you get into for those that want to sweat, it'll make you sweat. If you want that, it is there. So again, just going back to that they really nailed it.
Right.
Where newcomers who never picked up a controller in their life could play the game, but also, platforming veterans, there was challenge waiting for them at the end of
if you get far enough in the game, it's just like any other Mario game, any other regular game, where it's not going to get any easier.
Exactly.
It's going to the opposite. It's going to get harder.
Yeah, and that's essentially, that's the thing with most Mario games, like to beat the actual game, it's not really that daunting, but for those that stick around, after you've beat Bowser, and that's when they always bring their A game in terms of challenge.
Sure.
Galaxy was that way for sure. And then also moving forward to Galaxy 2. So of course, Mario Galaxy exploded. It was one of the, it won like most of the Game of the Year awards that year that it came out. It was a huge success.
Right.
So interestingly, as that seems to happen to Nintendo a lot, they had so many ideas and things that they wanted to do in Galaxy that there was just no way that they could cram all of that into one game.
Right.
And so, of course, that just meant that most of that just naturally spilled over into Galaxy 2.
Right.
And so, Galaxy 2...
Which makes sense, according to one of the notes that I made note of, of this being, I think, the only instance of where a 1 and a 2 are in one console.
Yeah. Funnily enough.
Yeah, I according to the research that I did,
Sure.
It seems like, but in this case, it makes sense that they just had so much material for one, that they were like, we're gonna have to break this up, and. It makes even more sense when you look at the timeline, because Super Mario Galaxy was 2007, and then only 3 years later you get the sequel.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's not even like if they were starting from scratch or building upon that with no extra material left over. Like that's not enough time.
Yeah.
Like you're talking at least 4, maybe 5 years.
It's staggering. It is. And but the only way they were able to do that, like you said, is just because first of all, the engine for the game was already made. They used the same thing they used for the first game, so that was already in place. And they basically just kept going. They just Mario Galaxy came up, but they just kind of continued. Which means that Galaxy 2 definitely the galaxies just got so much more like expansive and just whereas the galaxies in the first one were incredible and varied and intricate enough, the second one went even further with it. One of the coolest innovations is it adds Yoshi as a playable character who was not present in the first Galaxy game. So in the second game you get Yoshi, and what's cool is Yoshi kind of gets his own little abilities. You eat certain power-ups, and so if you eat like the red chili, then it makes him really, really hot and it makes him run really, really fast.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah, if you get the balloon, it's like a blue fruit, and if you get that one, he like swells up and he becomes this balloon, then you can float up.
Yeah.
And then there was one that made him light up. If you were in like a really dark galaxy, he'd swallow that like glowing fruit, and then he would become like a little light that you could see and everything. So, Yoshi was super cool. Your hub world this time, instead of Rosalina's observatories, you actually got your own ship called Starship Mario. Oh wow! Which looked like a giant, literally just looked like a giant Mario head that you flew around, like literally. Which is amazing, and I love it.
It kind of like, I don't know why I just envisioned like a Mario head Death Star.
yeah.
Except like much less ominous and more like, here we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was super cool. It added a few new power-ups. In addition, they brought all the ones from the first game back, which is super cool. But then they also added the cloud suit. So you would jump and you'd flick the Wiimote, and then a little cloud would form underneath you, so you could make little platforms.
That's right.
For yourself, which was super cool. There was the rock power-up, where you became this little boulder, and you gained traction, then you'd take off and barge through things. And then there was like the drill power-up. It was super, super freaking cool.
I also made note of a guide within the game for beginner players.
Probably. I didn't use it because I didn't necessarily
maybe it was like
an
optional thing. Like
probably.
If you've never played before, like it's kind of like
Yeah, it was probably there, and I just never. I probably saw it.
Chase just defaults to expert on everything.
It's fine. I don't. Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know about expert, but
sure.
Although this game is the game that allowed me to call myself Mario Grandmaster.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But well, no, we can get that because Galaxy 2 had some of the freaking coolest galaxies. And of the two games, you had like Cosmic Cove Galaxy, which was just this amazing aquatic level. One of my absolute favorite Mario levels ever was it's literally called Throwback Galaxy.
Okay.
And they recreated Thwomp's Fortress from Super Mario 64, but in like that galaxy twist sort of way.
Sure.
It is unbelievable. They even brought back the music from it, and oh my god, I mean, some of the best fan service ever was in Throwback Galaxy.
Okay.
Puzzle Plank Galaxy, which if you're ever in a down mood, listen to the soundtrack from that stage. It's one of the funnest things ever. It is so fun. But then, so I was talking about Grandmaster. So, one thing that some people did kind of complain about the first Galaxy, it was a little bit too easy. So, holy crap, Nintendo heard that, and they were like, okay. So, the very last Galaxy, oh my god, I get PTSD just thinking about it. It's called Grandmaster Galaxy.
Okay.
So the regular version of Grandmaster Galaxy alone is difficult. It's this just kind of gauntlet sort of galaxy where it's just one challenging, thing after another that you have to, and it goes on seemingly forever.
Right.
So you finally beat that, and you feel really good about it, and then you have to do it again. Because one of the things that's reoccurring in both Galaxy games, once you beat a galaxy or finish a galaxy, what's called a comet will come to that galaxy, and it'll introduce like a new extra challenge for that galaxy. So sometimes you'll have to do what's called a Daredevil challenge, where you can't take a hit. You have to do the whole thing without getting hit.
Okay.
Or a speed run, where you have to do the whole level within a certain amount of time. That kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So they make you do Grandmaster Galaxy again, but you have to do it with the Daredevil Comet, which means you can't get hit. You cannot take one single hit. If you get hit, you have to start the whole thing over. And not only that, but they also they add like mines everywhere and they add more lasers, more enemies. I was stuck on that level for 2 weeks. It is grueling.
It sounds incredibly stressful.
Oh my god. It is one of the hardest Mario levels in the entire canon. Hands down. So for those who complained about the first game, Nintendo came back with a vengeance with Grandmaster Galaxy.
We'll show you.
Yeah. There were tons of galaxies in that, like, special galaxy, like they called it. But that one in particular, Grandmaster Galaxy, is notorious. It took me 2 weeks. On that one level.
Yeah,
I about pulled my hair out.
That's nuts.
But I am a completionist, and so I had to do it.
Right. Yeah, you're like, I can't let this stand.
Well, yeah, because Galaxy 2 is also double the size of the first game. The first game had 100.
Is it really?
The first game had 120 total stars. Mario Galaxy 2 had 242 stars.
Wow.
Yes. So it's a bigger game in basically every way. And oh my god, it's amazing.
Do you think it took you with that twice as long to beat it? Or
yeah, probably. I mean, I would think so. I can't remember exactly the timeline of how long it took me to play them. But I mean, if it's double the stars, I would think, yeah, it makes sense.
Sure.
But I mean, like I said, Grandmaster Galaxy alone, I was stuck on for 2 weeks. Which, in of itself, I mean,
makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, the Wii was beautiful for the 3D era. It was essentially a continuation of the 2D era. So then that brings us, I believe, to
the 3DS games.
Yeah, so we're back to the DS, but this time it's 3DS.
Right.
So we have an analog stick. That's nice.
Yeah. I actually didn't have the quote-unquote pleasure of dealing with just the OG regular DS. I picked up the console, or the handheld Nintendo gaming, the new generation of Nintendo handheld gaming with the 3DS. Sure. And even with the 3DS, I was kind of late to it. I didn't get mine until 2015.
You and a lot of people, actually. The 3DS had a really rocky launch.
Okay.
Yeah, so the DS to this day remains one of the best-selling video game pieces of hardware in history.
Just period?
Yes.
Like consoles
it's
and
right
handhelds?
below the PS2, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. The DS was a massive success. 3DS, comparatively, compared to the DS, tanked, so to speak. I mean, it didn't do nowhere near as well as the original DS. It definitely had a rocky start. It built up it built up over time, but yeah, they had some trouble getting the 3DS going.
Do you think it was because of a lack of games to start out with, or like people just weren't buying into the 3D gimmick
Maybe,
of it?
Yeah, I mean,
and once again, I hate to use that particular word of gimmick, but
no, I mean,
because it is fun for short periods of time. I told you about playing Luigi's Mansion on Dark Moon, and I'll play with 3D for like maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
Well, and that's what a lot of people say.
I start to go cross-eyed, and I'm like, all right, I got to turn it off.
A lot of people kind of had trouble with the 3D effect, because the way that they accomplished it, you did have to hold the DS like perfectly still,
right?
You know, like at perfect eye level, because as soon as you tilted it or whatever, it was
right, yeah. And when you set it up, when you first turn on and you buy it for the first time, you have to like walk through that pretty rigorous series of like, you know, how you're going to hold it in your hands. Like they want to make sure that you're going to be able to look at it from a couple different weird angles and still be able to enjoy the 3D aspect of it.
Yeah, so the 3DS, you know, was rocky getting going, sure. So anyway, but so Nintendo really wanted to sort of bring again their A game with a Mario game, because of course that's always expected with any Nintendo hardware. We always expect a new Mario game,
right?
And so in this case, since it was the 3DS and they were trying to push the 3D thing, then we got Super Mario 3D Land.
Yeah.
So a return to the Land series for the first time since the Game Boy, which is interesting, although they're in no way similar at all, and you know, other than Mario and Goombas and stuff.
Sure.
So Mario 3D Land, you know, I gotta go a little faster here.
No, you're good.
So it's weird. It's a 3D game that definitely takes advantage of that 3D effect. However, it's strange. It's almost in this sort of like 2D, 3D hybrid sort of thing.
Sure.
So, for example, you can't rotate your camera. So instantly that brings to question 3D.
Right.
In some regards. It's always a fixed camera. The only thing that separates it from the 2D games is the fact that you sort of run around in these sort of like diorama levels, so to speak. So it's not like these huge expansive levels like in Super Mario 64 or Sunshine Galaxy. So it's not like on that level of 3D Mario games. So you're on these sort of like these little diorama courses, so to speak. They're very linear. They're not these, again, big open, huge expansive worlds. But it is 3D in that, you know, you do have like, you know, Mario has all directions around him, that you can move him in every which direction and stuff like that. And there's a sense of also verticality to the levels and stuff like that. The cool thing is this game was obviously designed with the 3D effect in mind. So if you do play it with the 3D on, it is really cool. You know, when, you know, bullet bills come at the screen, it, you know, looks like they're coming at you. And, you know, certain instances where Mario jumps on these like mushroom platforms, when he jumps, it looks like he's about to like come up out of your screen. They do some really cool stuff with the 3D effect. Yeah, otherwise, it's essentially a 2D Mario game of that era, like those new Super Mario Brothers games. It's essentially that, but in the sort of like 3D-ish diorama-esque sort of, you know, package, I guess, so to speak. It's kind of hard to explain. Anyway, but it's a great game. I loved 3D Land. I don't think it took me too terribly long to beat, and I did 100% it. It had another one of those super hard challenge levels at the very end. Nothing like Grandmaster Galaxy. It's still, I was still stumped on it for maybe a day or two. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it brought a few new power-ups. It brought the Tanuki suit back, actually, since like Mario Bros. 3 on the NES.
Oh, wow.
Which was super cool.
Which suit was that?
The Tanuki suit, the one that was like the raccoon suit where he has a little tail.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they brought that back, which was super cool. They brought back the boomerang suit.
Okay.
And there was like a statue suit where he turned into like this statue you could crush things with. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's basically another 2D Mario game, but it's all wrapped up in this 3D presentation that looked really, really cool. And I did play the whole game with the 3D effect on, because that's one game that you do kind of lose that like intended effect if you don't have it on. Yeah, it just
makes more sense to have it on. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that happened, and then following that, was New Super Mario Bros. 2, and I'll briefly hit that because basically it's New Super Mario Bros. From the DS with an emphasis on coin collecting.
Okay.
That's pretty much the long and short of New Super Mario Bros. 2. It again didn't really invigorate the 2D franchise very much.
Sure.
More so, it just added this new level of like. The goal was to collect 1 million coins. And so that was a huge thing. It added like this gold mushroom power up where it would turn Mario gold, and so everything you hit, it would turn into coins and stuff. So that was cool. And there was the gold block. If you jumped into it, it would get stuck on your head, and then if you ran with it, coins would fly out of it. So I mean, there was some cool things that were tied in with the coin collecting, vibe that they were really driving home with that one. But otherwise, Peach gets kidnapped by Bowser. Mario gives chase.
Par for the course.
Yeah. Again, not to discredit it, it's a great game. Super, super fun. All of these are great. Just be aware. Yeah, it's just more of that.
Right on.
I remember the boss fight, the dry Bowser boss fight at the end was super cool. I loved the dry Bowser fight at the end. So, from there... we go even further with the 2D games. So New Super Mario Bros. U.
Yes.
U as in the Wii U.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Wii was Nintendo's like, we're back in control of the market sort of thing, the Wii U was like, oof.
Just kidding.
Yeah, so the Wii U was a massive flop.
That's kind of the feeling I got. After I kind of went through my Wii phase, it was just that. Like I kind of fell out. It was in that period of my life where I was starting to try to figure shit out just in general. Sure. And so I kind of lost touch with video games, and so I kind of lived vicariously through other people with their video gaming. Like, hey, what are you playing? What consoles are good right now? What games are good? Yeah. The overwhelming majority of people who like found other people who spent their money on Wii U's and like played the games, they're just like, it's not worth it. If you're thinking about getting one, don't.
They were few and far between.
Yeah.
So the Wii, I mean, by that point, I think people were just weed out.
Yeah.
I think people were like, and it was so similar, but yet so strangely different to the Wii that it just confused most consumers.
Right.
Whereas the first Wii was really straightforward, motion controls, everybody's in. It was very clear about what the Wii was.
Right.
The Wii U had like this gamepad that was your primary controller, but you couldn't take it away from the console. So you had to be in the same room as the system itself.
Sure.
So obviously this was the precursor to the Switch.
Yeah.
The gamepad idea. But man, the implementation was just really kind of wonky. At first, when they first announced it, a lot of people didn't even know that it was a new console. People thought it was just like an add-on to the Wii. So like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it really just confused people. So the Wii, and it really never bounced back. Like the N64 and the GameCube didn't do like ecstatically well, but they did well enough that like Nintendo was still doing good as a company.
Right.
The Wii U was the first time they reported like serious financial losses.
That sounds right.
Right. Since the Wii U was flopping so hard, third party was basically non-existent. Nintendo was kind of left to make their own games. There was not a whole lot of third party support at all. So anyway, so that's sort of that's the U in the New Super Mario Bros. U. And yeah, again, like all the other New Super Mario Brothers games, I mean, it's in HD, which is nice. It looks nicer.
Sure.
I mean, the multiplayer is back, which is also fun. But apart from that, it added like the squirrel suit where Mario became like a flying squirrel. That was fun. And one of the coolest things for players like me was this challenge mode that it added, which was awesome. I mean, some of the most outrageous circumstances that Mario's ever been put in. I mean, like seriously crazy challenges.
Okay.
They were so much fun to get lost in. Though that was really the bulk of my experience with Mario Bros. U was with the challenge mode. So that was a really cool innovation that I would love to see be brought back. But like there were baby Yoshis, which were cool.
Okay.
You picked them up. They were so cool because you'd think they'd be like these really like cute little just like mini Yoshis, but they were actually like these really small fat Yoshis. And so you like they just looked really lazy and they just kind of lay there and just kind of like
as babies do.
Right, yeah. And so you actually had to carry them through the whole stage.
How convenient.
Yep. Which is so funny. It's like reverse Yoshi's Island.
Right.
Where like Yoshi's, you were carrying baby Mario through all the stages. Now Mario is
right, and regular Yoshi's in the background like, payback's a bitch.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they could do some cool little things if you were able to keep the baby Yoshi, which could be challenging at times because, it added a character called Nabbit, who would you'd have to like chase down and catch him because he would steal something or other. I mean, it was again some just little tweaks here and there, but otherwise like visually, whereas it was in HD, it looked like the Wii game in HD. Basically, there wasn't a whole lot of visual.
So I take
innovation.
I take it you owned a Wii U or
Oh yeah.
I wasn't sure if like you just kind of if you played it for with a friend or someone that had one, or if you just ended up grabbing the Mario games that came out for the Wii U and then that were like re-released for the Switch.
Because for all its faults, the Wii U, it was a cool console. It
still had things to offer.
It had some great things to offer. Don't get me wrong. There were some great first-party Nintendo games. Mario Kart 8 was on, which is probably the best Mario Kart game.
Yeah.
Was on the Wii U. Mario Maker, which we'll get to, is a huge thing. A great Smash game was on it. Smash for Wii U was great. One of the biggest selling points and something that Nintendo needs to get on ASAP with this Switch is they did HD remasters of 2 Zelda games. They did Wind Waker, which was a GameCube game, and Twilight Princess, which was GameCube/Wii.
Okay.
They did HD remasters of both of those games and brought them to Wii U, and that easily, as of this moment, that's the best way to play those 2 games. It was super cool. It was one of the few games that made really great use of the gamepad. Because with Zelda, you have like the whole inventory thing. So be able to be playing the game and have your inventory on the gamepad. That was super cool. But otherwise, unless you were like a Nintendo diehard, it was a really hard sell.
Sure.
And New Super Mario Brothers, you really didn't help a whole lot because it looked so similar to the other New Super Mario Brothers new games, the new series. They also did New Super Luigi U, which was super cool.
Yeah.
Which was a much more challenging version of 3D of the base game, with new, shorter, much harder levels. That was super cool. And that actually got brought to Switch. So you can actually, if you're interested in that one and you have a Switch, which a lot more people have that console.
Yes.
Way more people. I'm sure you know the New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is on the Switch with some new features. It includes New Super Luigi U, which is super cool. And like I said, it's a great game. It's probably the best of the like new Super Mario Bros. Games.
Sure.
It has this gorgeous level that looks like it's taken after Van Gogh's Starry Night.
Oh, okay.
And it is it's easily like my favorite 2D Mario level. So there's some really cool stuff there. But then to kind of bounce back, Nintendo then did Super Mario 3D World. So we had 3D Land on the 3DS. So now we go to 3D World. And essentially it's a continuation of 3D Land where it still retains that sort of diorama feel to it.
Okay.
But on a much larger scale. You have a lot more flexibility, a lot more places to go, a lot more things to do. That's... I loved 3D World, actually. A lot of people sort of compared it to the new Super Mario Bros. Games. They kind of felt like it sort of was in that vein. It kind of played it safe, sort of thing. I loved 3D World. It was the first 3D Mario game to have multiplayer, which was super cool.
Okay.
And whereas the 2D Mario multiplayer games can be like just ridiculous chaos and it can be hard to see where you are,
right,
that kind of thing, the 3D one worked really well. That worked a lot better. It was a lot easier to keep track of people. And again, you know, it was a great way to get some newcomers kind of, you know, to play with some more experienced players. So that was super cool. It added the adorable cat suit, which made Mario like this little cat Mario.
Yeah.
And you could climb up walls and stuff, and you could like slash your claws at enemies. It was awesome. One of the best power-ups in the entire series. I love the cat suit. There was also like the double cherry where you get the cherry and then you have two Marios.
Oh,
and then if you get another one, like every time you got another cherry, I mean, you'd have like rows of Marios at some levels. It was so crazy, like so chaotic to keep up with where all of them were. But that was really cool. So there was like some really cool power-ups that came in. Interestingly enough, Rosalina came back from Galaxy, and that was the first time she was ever a playable character. You actually got to unlock Rosalina. And
Chase is pointing at an actual Rosalina. He brought more stuff this time. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's as much stuff as he brought for part one.
No, not that much.
But it's definitely a large assortment. I'll be, by the time this episode comes out, these photos will definitely be on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the little mini action figures and well, I don't know.
Yeah, the amiibo.
Yes, thank you. They're awesome, and it kind of makes me jealous, and I kind of want them.
I love the amiibo.
Yeah,
I don't even use them that much, but man, they're just great little figurines. They're so fun to collect.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Rosalina became a playable character in 3D World, and it was cool. She had like this little spin attack with her wand that was super cool. I'm trying to think. Oh my gosh, it had one of the coolest. So the Bowser boss fight, instead of it being Bowser got a hold of the cat power up. So you had to fight Meowser. Yes.
That's awesome.
It was wonderful. It was a great final boss. It was pretty intense too. But yeah, other than that, it had the super jazzy soundtrack, which was different, and I loved 3D World's soundtrack. Probably the most lingering thing with me with 3D World is it features what I would pretty easily consider to be the hardest level in any Mario game that I've ever played.
Okay.
So I'm a completionist. I usually play an entire game to completion. So I call myself a Mario Grandmaster because I beat Grandmaster Galaxy, but I can't call myself Mario Champion.
Okay.
Quite yet.
Sure.
So that's the final level in 3D World, whereas there was like Grandmaster Galaxy. In this case, there's a level called Champion's Road. And oh my God, I don't understand how it's possible. It was the same thing as Grandmaster Galaxy. I mean, I was on it for ages. I tried like over and over and over. I tried it with different characters, and it got to a point where I was like, I have to move on with my life because I can't keep doing this to myself. So
to this day, you haven't beaten it?
To this day, I still haven't beat Champion's Road. I know, and it still keeps me up at night sometimes. If you've beaten Champion's Road, you're a stronger fellow than I. So that's why I say I can call myself a Mario Grandmaster, but I cannot call myself a Mario Champion yet.
Well, none of us are perfect.
Yeah. We all have our limits, I guess.
Yeah. If it makes you feel any better, I wouldn't be able to beat it either.
Oh no, I've seen people online beat it, and it's usually by like freak chance. They get lucky at some point or something, or something like that. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
When was the last time you've gone back to it?
I never went back. I can't. Yeah, I'm not ready for that yet. The wound is still fresh.
Sure.
Someday I will, because I definitely want to replay it because 3D World was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's one of like the last Wii U games that hasn't been brought to Switch, because since the Wii U was such a flop, Nintendo has been awesome to like bring most of the great Wii U games to the Switch.
Sure.
Which has been fantastic because so many people missed out on those games. Like I said, the Wii U had a lot of great games.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, 3D World is one of the only major Nintendo games that haven't made that jump yet.
All right.
Historically speaking, I'd like to say it's only a matter of time. I would like to think.
Makes sense.
There wasn't a whole lot of like gamepad implementation, so I don't see any like technical barrier there.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's 3D World. Highly recommend if you can get your hands on a Wii U. So after that, oh my god, after that is Mario Maker. So this was a huge selling point for a lot of people.
Right.
With the Wii U. And this made great use of the gamepad, obviously. So what Mario Maker is, it's exactly what it sounds like. Super Mario Maker was a toolkit where you could design your own Mario levels. Mm-hmm. And you could do it in the style of the original Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario World, or the new Super Mario Brothers U, like modern look. Mm-hmm. So you could design it in any of those game styles, and it literally gave you everything you needed from those games, all of the like signature blocks and power-ups and enemies, and you literally on this like grid, you got to be your own little game designer, and you got to make your own Mario levels.
Right.
And oh my god, I mean, it was genius. And what's so funny is it was initially developed as a toolkit for the devs to make Mario games with.
Wow.
And someone just had the idea, like, why don't we just give this to people and, let them make some, and it exploded.
Yeah.
And the community was
oh, they were all about
huge.
it.
Yeah.
This is like when this came out, it was right around the time where like the internet and like stuff going viral, like the term like viral was kind of being coined at that time. So like it made sense for this to kind of be parallel with that time period where like all of a sudden you started seeing people like trying to make these impossible levels.
Crazy. Oh my god, people used to go nuts with these things.
Right. And the stipulation that you told me about, because I didn't really look too much into it. I never owned Super Mario Maker. But so, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have to, in order to make a level available publicly, you have to be able to beat it yourself.
Right, exactly. Okay. You cannot publish a broken, like unbeatable level,
right?
To the online service, because that was the big selling point. Not only could you make your own levels, but you could post them to the game's server and play people's levels from all over the world, which was awesome. But yeah, so that was sort of the one requirement, was that you had to beat it yourself before you could post it.
Did anyone ever, like, and I just thought of this like last night or earlier today, did anyone introduce the idea of reversing that or backtracking and letting people publish like quote unquote unbeatable levels, but if someone beats that, they get some sort of bragging rights?
I mean, I would like to say those actually kind of exist. There are levels that I swear I don't understand
how it's beatable.
Oh my god, there's this one dude who he's like known for it. Like he's made a name for himself for making these just absolutely impossible levels.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't
is
remember.
Is it one with just like the fire sticks and there's like a million of them and they're just rotating?
It's literally like you have to. I mean, it's like the most precise down to like the pixel platforming you'll ever see in your life.
Yikes.
Picking up a Koopa shell, throwing it across the lava, jumping and then when it bounces back, jumping off that Koopa shell. I mean, it's like staggering,
right?
What some of these people have made. I mean, it's
really making use of what Nintendo has made themselves known for.
It is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that was a great implementation of the gamepad. I used to sit there for hours with that gamepad and the stylus and just sit there and make my own Mario levels and make my partner, and like make him go through, like he would get home from work and be like, made you a level. And like, that was what he
Great, this is just what I want when I get home.
Exactly. And of course, I would always make them just brutal. I did one called the conveyor belt of death. And I beat it. So I knew it was possible. But oof. oof, he got around to it, but oh my god.
Okay.
Yeah. And it, because it was always easy just to kind of like throw everything in the level, which
Right.
was the thing about Mario Maker. People used to just go nuts. But anyway, so Mario Maker is a phenomenal game. So I guess the next Super Mario game is Super Mario Run.
Right.
Which I can't really speak much about.
I can.
Really? Okay.
A small amount.
Awesome,
I
because
was
I
actually
haven't-
playing it at work today.
Okay.
Not,
Awesome.
during lunch.
Because I am not a mobile gamer.
Yeah, I'm not either. But honestly, since I
Nothing wrong with it, but that's just not my...
Sure, yeah, and I think it's Nintendo's really only like mobile game, right?
Oh, no.
Like,
They've been
do
pushing
they ha-
mobile hard.
Oh, do they have more?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they have.
They've got Mario Kart Tour.
That's right.
Which is a
Yeah,
huge deal.
Yeah, that one just came out not too long ago.
Yeah, that's a big deal right now. There's Dr. Mario World, which is cool. Fire Emblem something. There's a Fire Emblem mobile game which is really popular. That's been raking in loads of money for them. I think that's actually their most successful mobile game is that Fire Emblem one.
Okay.
I think, or it's one of them. And then there's Super Mario Run. And there's a few others. Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Which is extremely successful. That's been really, really popular too. Yeah, Nintendo's been pretty good about the mobile market in the last few years. But Run, I think, was the first big one.
Sure.
Like I think that was sort of their first foray. So do you like it? Like
I do. Like at first, when I booted it up and I realized that it, you hold the phone naturally, vertically and not horizontally like you would, I guess a 2D platformer.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, but a lot of the appeal comes from, or the reasoning behind, holding it, the phone naturally is because the game is kind of like designed like that. What goes on during when you're not in gameplay, and then during gameplay, you can like double tap the screen, and when you jump, like you can tap again and you'll jump even higher. And so having it vertical gives you that ability to jump even higher and hit these, other boxes. And I mean, it's fun. Like it's, if you like things that like games that are on tracks where, you don't have to worry about, running, and it runs for you.
Right.
And all you have to worry about is, avoiding enemies and hitting boxes and stuff. I haven't gotten too into it.
Sure.
But, I just, whenever I'm bored, I'll boot it up and I'll play for, 10, 15 minutes, and it's fun.
Yeah, which is what it was designed
to
do with, I would assume. I mean, it's a mobile game. I assume it's sort of meant with that like pick up and play mentality.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. That is, just like any other Mario game, not meant to be taken too seriously.
Yeah.
But especially with it being mobile, and it's the whole thing of it is like on the go.
Right.
It's just you pick it up whenever you want. If you're bored or if you got some time to kill, you boot up the Mario game, and I don't know. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah.
So Mario Run was their big mobile game for Mario, which was super cool. So then we come to I guess modern day Mario.
Yes.
So
kicking off the Switch.
The Wii U was a flop, and Nintendo seriously wanted to get their market back. They seriously wanted, and so you see a lot of the seed planted with the gamepad from the Wii U, which went on to become the Switch. And the Switch, I mean, there's analysts that are thinking it might eventually outsell the Wii. It's doing so well.
Wow.
Yeah. So the Switch is hot, and it for good reason, because if you look at the current climate of gamers and people that play video games and stuff, one of the biggest complaints is that we don't have time to just go home and like sit down on the couch
and
play a game. But Nintendo noticed the mobile trend, people playing a lot on the go. So they had this like genius idea to give you the best of both worlds,
Right.
And made essentially the first successful hybrid console. In that it's a home console when you want it to be,
Yep.
and it's there on TV, and it's that's exactly what it is. It's a home console.
Yep.
But as soon as you want to go and head out into the real world, it's as simple as going up to it and undocking it.
Right.
And taking it with you.
Yeah, and it's literally the perfect size.
And
it's not too big and clunky. It's not tiny.
The screen is a great size. It's super portable, especially with the new Switch Lite.
Yeah.
That just came out, which is solely portable. You can't dock it to your TV, but but there's a lot of gamers that are like that, who literally they don't have time at home, but like when they're on the bus commuting to work or on their lunch break.
Yeah.
That's something that they love to do, is to take it out and play some whatever.
Right.
And so the Switch has been insanely successful. And so one of the first big titles, I don't think it was a launch title actually, but I don't think it was far off, was Super Mario Odyssey. And oh my god. So Super Mario Odyssey is essentially like a love letter to Mario. It is essentially a celebration of Mario's legacy, that literally culminates in like a literal celebration at one point. The climax is in this beautiful celebration of Mario, and it is just crammed with like fan service and nods to old games. Some small, some are really like, I want to say it, but if you've not played Mario Odyssey, I would never want to spoil it for you. But oh my god, some of the late game stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's amazing.
Good stuff.
Oh my god, I don't even know where to freaking start. Okay, so every Mario 3D game, like I said, essentially you have a companion character. 64, like I said, was sort of the Lakitu with the camera. Mario Sunshine obviously was Flood. Galaxy, I didn't mention, you had a Luma that was traveling with you like all the time. And that's what allowed you to do your spin, jump, move, and that sort of thing.
Sure.
It wasn't a very present companion, nothing like Flood, but you did have a Luma with you constantly. 3D World didn't. But Odyssey definitely integrated probably their best companion character in the form of Cappy.
Yeah.
Which is a genius. And then that's like, every Mario game has like a staple motif, theme, whatever. And that's the big thing with Odyssey is Cappy. So what Cappy allows you to do is you throw Cappy at an enemy or an object or whatever, and Cappy will possess that creature or object, and then you get to control it.
Right.
Which is so cool. So, like, as a longtime Mario fan, what was so insane is that it finally kind of put you in the shoes of these, like, enemies that you've been stomping on for years and years and years. And you kind of quit just thinking about them, like Goombas and Koopa Troopas.
Right.
You threw Cappy at him, and then you literally became a Goomba. And then you'd walk around as a Goomba, and then, and they all did things they all had, of course, abilities that you needed to get to Power Moons. Because that was a big change, too. They're not Power Stars anymore. For the first time, you're not collecting stars, you're collecting Power Moons. Yes. And contrary to other past games, they are everywhere. So, I told you there were 242 stars in Galaxy. I think there's like 800 plus moons in Odyssey.
That's a lot.
It is staggering. So they're everywhere in Odyssey. And what's so, what's so freaking cool. So in other past Mario games, you get the star at the end of the level, and he does like his animation,
Right.
And then you get booted out of the level. You go back and it tells you how many coins you got, and it kind of gives you a rundown of what you did. And then you have to jump back into the level to get the next star. Because usually something kind of changes or something like that. They kind of alter it a little bit.
Sure.
Odyssey is the first one to do away with that.
Okay.
Which meant you had total unbroken immersion for the first time. No matter what you did. you remained in that kingdom that you were exploring, and it was a godsend. So you would, you get to your power moon, you find a power moon just anywhere. I mean, you always had to work for it. It was never just lying out in the open.
Sure.
But you'd figure something out. You'd get a power moon. He'd do a little animation, and then he'd drop back down, and you could keep going and just continue.
Interesting.
Yes.
I never even really thought about that.
Right. Because we got so used to it like that.
Yeah.
That you just don't even really think about it, I guess. A lot of people, I guess, just, like kind of fell into that as just like the normal Mario thing.
Right.
So for Odyssey to give you that level of just,
independence.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
To just go crazy. You didn't feel as like, oh, well, there's a star. Awesome. Like,
yeah,
I get to beat the level, but I'm fixing to get booted out again.
Right. Cuts down on the constriction.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives you like total unbridled freedom, which has been a huge thing with the Switch in general, actually. Zelda did the same thing with Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. That's been a huge thing with the Switch, seemingly with Nintendo. They've loved this idea of that sense of just unrestricted freedom.
Right.
And that's definitely present in Odyssey. So yeah, there's collectibles and power moons literally everywhere. But like I was saying, Cappy is the main draw here, and that's what's so cool about it. It does return to that sort of Super Mario 64, Super Mario Galaxy sense of like, the kingdoms are all very different. Mm-hmm. You have like a sand kingdom, you have a jungle kingdom, and then, oh my gosh, you have one of the coolest kingdoms in the entire freaking world. It's called Metro Kingdom, and it's essentially a Mario's take on New York City. It's actually called New Donk City is the name of the kingdom.
I'm actually picturing it right now in my head because I haven't played it firsthand, but I've seen, like online gameplay and stuff.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's just the coolest thing in the world. And what's really interesting about it is what some of the conversations that it's fueled, because this is the first Mario game that's ever shown a human.
Right.
And so you see Mario, we've always just seen Mario as a cartoon human, like a guy, just he's a plumber. Right. But then you see him interacting with all these humans, and he looks completely different. He's like short, and he's all cartoonish, and then the humans all look real, and they're tall, and so
like
it's actually,
humans. Yeah,
it's fueled this conversation of like, what is Mario?
Yeah,
what exactly is he?
Yeah, he's not as human as we kind of thought he was. It's like pitted up against like mushrooms with legs and weird looking turtles. Like, he looks pretty human. Given the status of a plumber with legs and a head and arms and a torso. But pitted up against like things that are supposed to look human.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's so but it works really well though with Odyssey's just whole aesthetic. It meshes really well, but it has kind of fueled some fun conversations
for sure
about the nature of like what is Mario,
right?
Who is Mario, or specifically what is Mario? So yeah, aesthetically, I mean, obviously it's the most gorgeous Mario game you can get your hands on. It looks incredibly good. The graphics are beautiful. The capture mechanics are just so varied. I won't give too many away because those are fun little surprises when you get to capture certain things.
Yeah.
But some that a lot of people are aware. I mean, like they're in the trailer. It's like the T-Rex. You throw the cap on this like giant, real-looking T-Rex, and then you get to like thrash around as this T-Rex and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, you build a stack of like Goombas. You build a Goomba tower to like impress this like female Goomba. I mean, like stuff like that. There's like oh my gosh, one of the weirdest ones is early on in the Forest Kingdom. There are these onion things, and you capture them, and they're able to grow their stalks really, really tall, and they pop up. And, I mean, it's almost hard to explain. It's such a strange mechanic, but it works so well.
Okay.
It's just so creative with all the different things I think there's one point you literally capture a slab of steak in the Food Kingdom. Yeah. I mean, it is crazy. I mean, you can capture just about anything. Like zippers, there'll be like a giant zipper on the wall, so you'll capture the zipper and you become the zipper, and then you like run around and unzip the wall, and I mean, it is crazy. So yeah, the whole thing with Odyssey is just that whole sense of like unrestricted freedom, completely non-linear. Because what's crazy is as expansive and like open as 3D Marios have always kind of given the illusion of, they've actually always been pretty straightforward on like linearly speaking. They've always been pretty direct. You start here, star is here, you need to end there. And so, and that's usually, you have some leeway depending on how many stars you've had, if you don't want to do this particular painting or galaxy or whatever part of Al Delfino, you don't have to if you have enough stars. So you could skip certain levels. But otherwise, generally speaking, Mario levels have always been pretty linear. And that's something that Nintendo definitely wanted to take away from Odyssey. They wanted you to literally walk into a kingdom and, you can go for the main moon if you want to.
Sure.
Or you can hang a sharp right and take off that way. And there's going to be plenty of stuff over there that you can spend plenty of time doing. And like I said, they did the same exact thing with Zelda, with Breath of the Wild. Basically saying, here's your end goal if you want to go ahead and do it. But, there's no one's going to do that. Everyone's going to go off the beaten path because that's what we do.
Sure.
That's like how that's just how we think for some reason. We see that there, but then we're like, but what's over here? Mm-hmm. What's over here? We're all about doing, people love exploring like that. Especially in the safety of a video game where there's no consequences.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely personally relate to that feeling where I'm like, okay, like I know there's door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3. Mm-hmm. What if I pick door number 1? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and pick door number 1. Yeah. And turns out that that's the right door. Yeah. But you don't want to go in quite yet. Like, you want to see what else is out there.
Exactly. And that's exactly what Odyssey taps into. Mm-hmm. Brilliantly. And they just make every kingdom so fun to explore because they're all so different. Not only in that, they all look different, but every enemy is different. It's not like you have recurring like Goombas and Koopa Troopas and like the standard enemies. They are reoccurring, but they have a much smaller role now. Now every kingdom has its own distinct enemy types and NPCs that you interact with and stuff like that. For the first time, you can ditch Mario's red and blue classic get-up because every kingdom has its own signature outfits that you can wear.
Okay.
So, of course, like the Snow World, you can get his, like, snow gear.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Oh, my gosh. Of course, on one of the beach kingdoms, you get, like, his swim trunks and, like, a scuba suit.
Yeah.
And so, they add that level of customization. And oh my god, late game, like I said, some of the outfits that you can get, like there's just so much fan service. Oh, I want to say it so bad, but I don't want to spoil anything.
Sure.
But yeah, and one of the other really, really cool integrations is, like I said, it's a celebration of Mario. This whole game really is.
Right.
So what's so cool is there's also tons of these little sections where you walk up to a wall and there's a warp pipe or on the ground or something. And you go in the pipe, and then all of a sudden this wall becomes a 2D original Mario Bros. Stage. And it becomes... and then you literally have this entire like 2D Mario level to play on this wall to get to a moon or to get to a new area. And it is the coolest thing in the world how they've integrated... and I mean, like original Super like NES old Mario Brothers.
Right.
Yeah, they integrate these awesome little short and sweet 2D Mario levels that he goes in these warp pipe and then he comes out of the warp pipe as like his 8-bit pixel form, and then you do the whole 8-bit level, and it is just it's brilliant. It's such a love letter to Mario. And for me, who played the entire Mario franchise in one sitting, like I literally I put that NES cartridge in and said, okay, this is happening. And I literally played every single Mario game that followed up to Odyssey, chronologically. So to have all of those classics fresh on my mind,
right,
to play Odyssey is like that climax was the most. It was just. I will never. I don't think I'll ever have another gaming experience quite.
Oh yeah,
like
I
that.
bet it was pretty damn incredible.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it could like like I said, it. I mean, there's actually a literal celebration at one point. Which they actually wrote a theme song for. It's the first time Mario ever had a theme song with lyrics sung by a like professional jazz singer and everything.
Wow.
Called "Jump Up Superstar," and it is awesome. And,
Interesting.
Yeah, and if when you get to that point, Mario will actually dance to it if you let him.
All
it
right.
is a joyous thing to behold. Oh my gosh. So anyway,
So now I want to go buy a Switch.
Oh my god, that right there! I mean, that's why I bought mine.
Sure,
literally because I was, I got to the Wii U and I was wrapping up 3D World, and I just kept seeing reviews for Odyssey, and they were like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, like across the board, just people drooling over it. Like, this is the culmination of Mario. This is like everything you want Mario to be, and I'm sitting there like, having played the whole franchise over the span of like months and months and months, and like there's Endgame. I went to my local game, my guy at Media Rerun, and I bought a Switch for that game.
So had you had the Switch and Mario Odyssey come out already by the time you got to the point of like, okay, I just beat the next to last game, now I'm ready for Odyssey? Or did you have to wait?
I actually bought them together.
Okay.
I was actually able to, he, again, like I said, it was a local thing, so someone brought their Switch in, and like, as fate would have it, he also brought in his copy of Odyssey with the Switch to trade in at Media Rerun, which is like a used store here in Murfreesboro. I bought my Switch with a copy of Odyssey with it.
Okay.
And I went home. I think I was either right about to finish or 3D World, or I had just finished it because it was perfect timing whenever it was. And that was my first Switch game, as it was for many. It was a selling point for me. Of course, now the Switch library has grown to staggering size.
There's a lot out there.
Oh my god, the Switch's library is unbelievable.
Right.
But that right there, I mean, if you needed any reason, pick up Mario Odyssey, pick up Breath of the Wild, get Mario Kart 8, Smash Ultimate, holy crap. I mean,
with its like 90 billion
Oh
characters
my gosh.
play. What'd you say? There's like
That's
upwards of 80 or 90.
80 plus, yeah.
That's a lot.
And they've announced that they've got 6 more.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
It's quite a step up from the last time that I played, which was the 64 days.
Yeah, like
and
12 characters.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Something like that.
Yeah, and I couldn't name you all the characters from the original Smash Brothers.
Yeah. So anyway, Odyssey is the perfect cap. Although technically, I guess there's also Mario Maker 2. We talked about Mario Maker earlier. So the most recent Mario game to come out on the Switch is Mario Maker 2, which is everything that you could have wanted from the first game and more. It is, they add all sorts of new pieces that you can add to your levels and stuff. Right. But they also included a story mode where the Nintendo devs themselves actually used the toolkit of the game and made their own professional Mario levels.
Right.
There's literally like a professional, insanely awesome, high quality 2D Mario game just included in Mario Maker 2. Probably the best modern 2D Mario game to date is the story mode in Mario Maker, to be completely honest with you.
That's an odd concept.
It's phenomenal. Because they got so creative, and because that's the problem that so many people have had with the new Super Mario Bros. Series,
right?
Is that they all just seem so samey. But Mario Maker's 2 story was so just wacky because the devs just and because what was cool too, not only was it creative, but it also showed you what the game could do. They would do something with the mechanics in the game, and then you go, oh, I didn't know you could do that with that block or whatever, and then you can implement that in your own levels.
Right.
So it's actually a tutorial in a way.
Okay.
Because you're learning as you're playing the developers levels. It is brilliant.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I guess to sum it all up, I've talked about some pros and cons, mostly pros, but I know some of like the new Super Mario Bros. Series. Some people are more vocal about some of the more negative aspects than others. I don't pay them much mind, honestly, most of the time, because really, when it boils down to it, Mario is the most recognizable video game character in the world for a reason. Mm-hmm. His games are phenomenal. No matter which one you pick up, you're going to have a freaking amazing time with it, whether it's
absolutely
new Super Mario Bros. On the DS or Odyssey, or even literally like OG Super Mario Bros. On the NES.
There's still a blast to play.
It's amazing how those games have not aged.
I know it's incredible how they've held up over the years. And I think a lot of what has to do with that is what you were saying in part 1 about the groundbreaking mechanics of it and how responsive the controls are and how precise everything is. It just works. And it works so well, and it's just so simplistic that
they play like a dream. They still play like a dream. And it's a great time too, because with the indie resurgence, there's a wealth of indie developers that are creating modern games, new games, but in that retro aesthetic.
For sure.
With like the pixel art and like the chiptune soundtracks and just trying to sort of, capture the magic of that era. So I think with that scene coming up and giving people that sort of taste of that vibe, that aesthetic, it makes those old Mario games even more approachable, because people are in tune with that. People love that. It's cool to go back and, I've said, I said in the collecting episode, I collect for, all consoles across all generations, but retro collecting is that's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's just such a magic to those old games, those old NES.
For sure.
That whole era, the N64 even, there is a magic to those games that, I don't know, modern games, they have their own magic, but that's a special magic that those old games have. And it makes a lot of them just kind of timeless. And none of them are more timeless than Mario. I mean, those games, you can put them under a microscope now, and, good luck pointing out flaws.
Right.
So, the games in and of themselves, but also just what Mario represents. He literally was like the savior of the industry. Had Mario not come along, who knows where the gaming industry would have ended up, if anywhere.
Yeah.
It was on the road to, going the way of the hula hoop and being written off as a passing fad.
Yeah.
And so he came along and, literally single-handedly just about, brought the industry back to the forefront and made it known, no, this was a huge industry. This is going to be huge. Right. And this is a big deal. And it's like I've said before too, every major revolution in gaming, whether it's 3D graphics, precision game development, motion control implementation, whatever, Mario, he's always one step ahead of everybody else.
Right.
Mario, he's always on the cusp of those that next big leap, that next big step in games. That's Mario, he's always leading the pack.
Yeah.
So we filled up 2 episodes about his, and we've only talked about his core franchise. We've not even talked about his the spin-offs and stuff. Which,
right.
Oh my God! Once you get in that territory,
it's a whole new can of worms.
He's appeared in more games than any other game character in history.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yes. Oh, it's just
mind-boggling. The Mario Brothers legacy alone is staggering.
Yes.
But all the spin-offs, I when I was doing the research and I looked at, I was like, okay, the Super Mario Brothers stuff, it's a lot. What else can be out there?
Sure.
holy shit. Like, there's a lot more out there.
You factor in his RPG games, factor in Mario Kart, Mario Party, Mario Paint. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Right.
Paper Mario. Oh my god, Paper Mario is so freaking good.
Yeah. I played that one.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think I ever beat it, but
I love Paper Mario. I mean,
it's unique.
I could go on and on and on, but no, like you said, even his core franchise is staggering. But what's even more staggering is that he's got a franchise that's big, and the quality is just unwavering. Every single, it's like I said, you can pick up any one of those games, and unless you're just in a mood, you ought to have a really good time with it.
Right.
I mean, those games, Nintendo, they're like the Disney of game developers. They're all about that broad appeal. No matter who you are, what age you are, you can approach a Nintendo game and just be that kid again.
Right.
And just get back in touch with that simpler time.
Yeah.
And that's just what Nintendo, to me, kind of represents. And I think that's why I am such an ecstatic Nintendo fan now.
Yeah.
Because that's a happy place, and it doesn't get much happier than freaking Mario.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that aspect and mindset, is wanting to have Mario as kind of a go-to for reminiscent of simpler times when things weren't so complicated, or as an escape, as video games are pretty
Pure
much meant to do. Yeah,
pure escapism.
But Mario especially is, standing the test of time. Just continues to do that for you and I and for everyone else. But yeah, I think unless you have anything else to add, I think that's a great place to kind of bring this full circle and wrap it up. But yeah, Chase, thank you so much. I know, you say that, hey, I enjoy talking about video games, but it's been an extreme pleasure on my part to have you for the third time now.
I love it.
In the studio and talking about, video games and Mario specifically. And just the wealth of knowledge that you have to bring to the table, and to enlighten me and to our listeners,
Absolutely.
I'm forever indebted. So I greatly appreciate it. And anytime I can, return the favor. If you start your own podcast, I will come on as a guest.
Dude, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. As always, you can look us up on geekgaragepodcast.com. Find us on social media. Go subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, basically any podcast app that you can think of. We're pretty much on there. Like I said earlier in the podcast, we have a Patreon. If you'd like to go check that out, see what we have to offer in our 2 tiers. We've got some cool perks for our donors, so definitely check that out. We have, of course, you can check that out on the Patreon website or on our website, and we've got links there. And as always, be kind, stay geeky, and eat lots of cheesecake. Bye!